Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Curators Talk for Constant Storm, Art from Puerto Rico and the Diaspora. This exhibition brings together several generations of artists living on the island and others who have left and are working in communities like New York, New Jersey, and Florida. The core theme of the exhibition is reflected in the title. It offers diverse perspectives of artists responding and reflecting on weather disasters brought on by climate change like Hurricane Maria, along with other continuing social, political, and economic difficulties in Puerto Rico. The curators have included artists that confront these issues and embrace ideas and strategies for constant renewal. The exhibition was curated collaboratively by Noel Smith, former deputy director of the Contemporary Art Museum and our curator of Latin American and Caribbean art, and Christian Viveros-Fauné, curator at large. Both Noel and Christian made studio visits in Puerto Rico and at various locations in mainland United States to develop this exhibition. While the past 17 months have been a time of intense self-reflection and realignment, in response to the continuing COVID pandemic, marked by significant social and civic unrest, the Contemporary Art Museum has continued to be committed as a platform through its temporary exhibitions, sometimes offered virtually or in a hybrid form recently, and related educational programs that are designed to raise awareness, explore issues, and provoke action. The curators have been very sensitive to these issues in putting this exhibition together, and I'm very appreciative of the work that they have done. The exhibition got postponed, and so the curators and artists had time to really evolve it into something that's really worthwhile coming to see if you haven't already seen it. And we will have a closing reception for this exhibition on November 19th, and I hope all of you will join us for that between 6 and 8 p.m. on the 19th at the Contemporary Art Museum. Several of the artists will be attending the reception. Constant Storm was made possible by a generous grant from the National Endowment for the Arts and the Florida Division of Arts and Culture, and with the support of the Tampa Bay Rays, who supported Miguel Luciano's visit and performance at one of the Rays games, and we're very appreciative of that. So there was also a symposium presented on October 2nd that was supported by the Humanities Center's grant from Florida Humanities. So it takes a lot of participants to put an exhibition of this caliber together. And I'm also very grateful to Tony Palms, who's also retiring, for his work in designing the exhibition, for Shannon Annis, who did all the work of a great registrar to bring important works here, and to Eric Jonas for his management of the installation. It's a terrific crew at the Contemporary Art Museum, and I continue to be very grateful to everyone for the great work we're able to do. So with that, it's my pleasure now to introduce you to Noel Smith and Christian Viveros-Fauné, who will do the curatorial tour tonight. Welcome.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Margaret, for that wonderful introduction. And I would also like to reiterate our thanks to the artists for accepting the postponement. And like you, I think the show is better for it, actually, one of the silver linings. And also thank the fabulous, fabulous crew of the Contemporary Art Museum that really makes things happen. Margaret, you gave really quite a good introduction to the exhibition. You can see behind me, that's the entrance, the opening to the exhibition, with a beautiful painting by one of the one of the artists, Angel Otero and Christian. We'll talk a little bit about that later. Mainly, it's we were interested in highlighting or bringing to the campus the art of Puerto Rico and the culture of Puerto Rico. The largest concentration of Puerto Ricans in the US mainland is now in Central Florida. So we're very interested in that community and in bringing their culture to you. Christian, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, you know, I want to run down a number of just sort of basic facts about Puerto Rico, just so we know whereof we speak, right? So first of all, Puerto Rico is a territory, not a state. I think many of you know that. Puerto Ricans are citizens and subject to US laws, but those who live in Puerto Rico cannot vote in presidential elections. The taxation without representation thing might pop into your head as you're listening to this. The unincorporated territory does not have voting representatives in Congress. The population of Puerto Rico is 3.194 million. As Noel, I think, just mentioned, there are many Puerto Ricans in Florida, but there are 5.6 million people of Puerto Rican descent living in the US. That is, there are more people of Puerto Rican descent living in the US than on the archipelago, right? Of those 5.6 million, 1,190,891 live in Florida. And it is estimated that some 130,000 people left Puerto Rico just in the year after Maria. That's nearly 4% of the population. The title of the show, Constant Storm, refers not just to Maria as maybe the best known disaster to have hit the archipelago in the last, it's been 4 years now, actually, right? It was 2017, September. But unfortunately, it has been a rolling series of storms that has hit the archipelago and the population there, and of course, the diaspora. And that's what we wanted to refer to in the exhibition. And we were lucky enough to have a tremendous company of artists basically agree to work with us on this. Mm. Maybe we can run through the show now with Mark Frederick's help, starting basically in the Levengood Gallery, and we'll essentially talk through, we'll take turns, Noel and I, talking through the work that's up on your screen.
Great.
Noel, you want to take?
Thank you. That was great data. To understand the situation, you really have to know that. And, you know, I think the artists, what they do is so concerned with what's going on in Puerto Rico and the history of Puerto Rico. It's important to know those things. Wanda Raimundi-Ortiz lives and works in Orlando. She actually teaches at the University of Central Florida. And she's an interdisciplinary visual and performance artist. So here, her work called Exodus Pilgrimage from 2019 clearly directly references the hurricane. In fact, a few days after Hurricane Maria hit Puerto Rico, Wanda went to San Juan, and she collected all of these things that you see actually that have been incorporated into this dress. So those are blue tarps and a lot of debris. There is on one side a Puerto Rican person told me there's a sign for Modelo beer. So it has all kinds of references to Puerto Rico in there. Of course, the dress she references Afro-Puerto Rican costumes. And, you know, with this work, she's really talking about how people came to the United States, not just after the hurricane, but after other events as well, basically with all they could bring on their backs. So it's really an homage to Puerto Ricans and to actually victims who were victims of climate change, as well as, you know, anything else. So this is accompanied by a video, because she did actually do a procession in downtown Orlando. So we have a wonderful video with this and some stills. So it is quite a spectacular work. When she came to put it up, she says, "I'll never wear it again because it's deteriorating." But we're lucky to have it.
And in the performance, you know, it also looks very heavy and difficult to perform in. But
Yes,
it's a great piece. It's a great piece. So this is Karlo and Rivera, right? And this work is called Niebla, which means fog in Spanish. As you can see, it's composed of 60 pretty modest sized canvases, right? About sort of yay big. And together they essentially make this sort of large monochrome mural, this sort of grisaille mural that has all the aspects of, you know, minimalist piece, right? Minimalism is not exactly well known for being a carrier of political or social commentary. And this is exactly what Karlo sort of does. He sort of hijacks the look of art, right? What we expect art to look like, almost art in quotation marks, and really slips a significant amount of content in there. So what's the content, you might be asking? Well, instead of paint, what he's used to essentially make the grisaille paintings in this large mural is toxic ash, which he recovered from something called the AES power plant incinerator. It's in the town of Peñuelas. It's been basically churning out toxic ash and dust and endangering the future of the town and the surrounding area, and of course its inhabitants. That coal ash has been linked to bladder, stomach, skin, lung, and kidney cancers, as well as asthma, emphysema, and infertility. You get some idea of the punch, again, that this particular piece sort of delivers. You know, AES is, of course, you know, a large global sort of US-based energy giant. And unfortunately, so Karlo was telling us, they pay the price that is the residents of this area in Puerto Rico pay the price for, well, that largeness, that they basically incur the dangers. Oh, I should also say that Karlo lives and works in San Juan, and he is half of this great DIY art space called Kilómetro 0.2, and it's in Santurce. The other half of that partnership we'll get to in a minute, because he's also in the exhibition.
Yeah, this Karlo's piece is so great. So this is arguably the happiest work in the show. This is a piece by Miguel Luciano, who's a New York-based multimedia visual artist. And he's very interested in themes of history, popular culture, social justice, and migration. He's an incredible speaker. So this is his version of a piragua cart. You can see Pimp My Piragua. Piragua is an icy, basically, but in a pyramidal form. So piragua means pyramid and awa. And so this is really an homage to street vendors who sell the treat and other things as well in Puerto Rico and through the diaspora. So with this work, this has video, it has music, it has lights, it's like a traveling party. So he will do performances in this. So he really puts a big block of ice in there, shaves it off, and then sweetens it with those. Right now, what we have, of course, is just colored water, but he creates his own syrups. So we actually had this piece, took this work over to the Rays, to the Trop, and he rode it around the field, and then he threw the ceremonial first pitch for Roberto Clemente Day. So it was quite a wonderful day. Behind him, you can, behind the cart, not seen very well, there you go, thanks Mark, are these two large scale paintings that really deal with the domination of foreign, specifically the USF, the US domination of Puerto Rico. And so on the right, you have the double-headed eagle and the vulture. He's very beautifully, I think, combined these vintage produce imagery with cartoon imagery and with some very topical things. This one on the right clearly has to do with agriculture and products. And then on the left, he's referring to the city of Barceloneta, which is outside of San Juan, that has the 5th largest pharmaceutical industry in the world. And that is assisted by very, shall we say, very lax or very favorable conditions for the companies to establish businesses in Puerto Rico.
Great paintings, and that Paragua is really sort of almost take a line from Hemingway, a movable feast. And we'll have Miguel back, fingers crossed, hopefully for our closing. So the work we're looking at now is by Rogelio Báez Vega, who is a tremendous painter. He lives and works in Santurce and also in New York. This has the look of, well, I don't know, it's got a certain Gothic look to it. I almost sort of expect Saint Jerome to be hiding in there somewhere. But it is titled sort of rather prosaically, ID Escuela Tomás Carrión Maduro, Santurce, Puerto Rico, new in the market. And I'll translate the Escuela Tomás Carrión Maduro. It's a school. It's an basically PS, what they called them in New York City, where I'm speaking to you from, the public school, right? Except it's a public school that is being, as the title indicates, listed as real estate, listed as property, right? It's up for sale. Rogelio generally likes to paint with a significant amount of texture. There's beeswax in there. Obviously, there's oil. This particular image is from a series that he's titled From Memory, de Memoria, and it's all really about sort of showing images or portraying iconic buildings from Puerto Rico's sort of modernization, period of modernization in the post-war. This building, of course, looks completely overgrown and underserved, unmaintenanced. In a way, part of what the painter is doing here is showing you a piece of reality in the guise of sort of a dystopian image. and giving you a sense of um, a dystopian future that maybe has already sort of arrived, right? This is again a public school that is about to be sort of sold off, and thus a piece of a community is being sold off to the highest bidder, right?
This I think is a painting that really rewards close looking, not only for its incredible textures, but the other day I was at the museum looking at these with a very eagle-eyed companion, and she's Puerto Rican. She discovered that if you look through those windows there, on the left part of the painting, there's a blackboard in there, and there's some very rude graffiti scratched in there. It's really hard to see, but it's really funny. It is a beautiful, beautiful piece.
It really is. It really is. He's a terrific, terrific painter.
Okay, Jezebeth. Jezebeth Roca González lives and works between La Diaspora and Oñasco, Puerto Rico. She's a multidisciplinary maker who uses performance photography, land, and plants through installations. She very, very often uses her family and her family home in Oñasco for her works. Oñasco is, she describes it as an island within an island. It's in the western part of Puerto Rico. And so this is based in her grandparents' house. And it really, it's a very intimate and very subtle, and I think very impressionistic kind of portrait. Her grandmother is called La Fábula de Luisa, or the Fable of Luisa. So it really, a fable talks about gods, and in this case, and big stories, and in this case, it's talking about Abuela Luisa. There's a dialogue that goes on there where it basically, I think, has to do, you know, Jezebeth says that while she lives in the diaspora, her family has stayed in Puerto Rico. So a lot of her work really deals with that tremendous tension. Here you have her grandmother talking about how she doesn't like the United States. She doesn't want to go there, but she would still like to have a permanent union so she could be a citizen. So, the section on the right, it's very interesting. Right over the grandfather's head, you can see the movie that they're watching. So it's a very, again, very subtle piece, and I think very revealing and quite poignant, I think.
Yes, it is. And I should also add, brilliantly installed by Tony Palms.
Yes.
In the corner of the Love and Good Gallery, making very good use of that space. Let's move on, Mark, to Angel Otero. Right, so Angel Otero's got two works in the show. This is the first one, which is actually also right behind, as it were, Noel. It is called September Elegy. It's a painting that Angel actually made very much thinking about Hurricane Maria, right? He made it sort of immediately in the aftermath of Hurricane Maria, and I had the great privilege of working with him on a show at the Bronx Museum where he essentially debuted that painting. You might consider that sort of black upside down triangle to be a void that, or a storm, or a tornado, or something that essentially resembles a storm. Do we have the other image, Mark? Okay, there you go. Okay. This painting is called Dreaming in Blue. Tornado Roche is essentially an homage to a Puerto Rican painter, late Puerto Rican painter Arnaldo Roche, who frankly loved him some blue. That's all he worked in. He worked in very brilliant blues like the ones that Angel has used here. It may sound well, he worked often in frottage, right, with paint, but with frottage, and in fact, often at scale. I've seen pictures of frottage is right when you rub something like a gravestone, and you essentially get the markings. Well, he did that with an airplane, if you can imagine that, and essentially made a massive painting. And talk about scale. In any event, he was an artist who was very important to Angel growing up as a baby artist, and so this is a piece of homage to him. I should mention that the way in which Angel works is not the way in which most painters work. He's basically sort of developed his own technique. The technique consists of essentially what's called decollage and then collage, and it's all oil, right? It's all oil paint, which he in these paintings has has originally sort of painted on plexiglass and then peeled what he calls oil skins off and then reattached them. If you manage to look at this picture closely, either in person or here or on our website, which, by the way, all this stuff is on our website, and so is a pretty terrific virtual tour that you can take through the exhibition. But when you sort of look closely at the painting, you'll see how it's essentially put together almost like a Frankenstein monster, right? It's layered. It has elements, in fact, that are not just paintings. There's some sort of netting in there that recalls, I don't know, the fabric in sort of mantillas for ladies. This is quite a large piece, and like the earlier piece that we were looking at, September Elegy, it is not clearly not confined by a frame. It's basically hung with a cleat at the very top, and it sort of drapes, right? And that's Angel. But this is a monumental piece, the one that we're looking at here, and really sort of a tour de force. And I think we're quite lucky to be able to show it. And again, this pieces like this, most of the pieces, all of the pieces, I should say, in the exhibition reward looking. But for those who love painting, I think this is a special treat. So if you manage to make it into the museum, spend some time with it. Noel?
Yeah, it's fabulous, really is. They had 6 people hanging it, and they said they could have used 10. So
there's some nice detail.
Pretty amazing.
I should say that Angel lives and works in Brooklyn. I'm trying to remember to say where everyone is from,
Yeah.
so that we get both sort of like the archipelago, Puerto Rico itself, and the diaspora, and the different points, right?
Exactly. Okay, so let's move on to our back hallway, which is an area which is challenging. And I think that the artists have done a really good job. Natalia Lassalle-Morillo divides her time between Puerto Rico and LA. And she is a filmmaker, visual artist, and educator. Sofía Gallisá Muriente lives and works in San Juan. And she is a visual artist who works mainly with video, film, photography, and text. So they were very, very interested in the Puerto Rican community in Florida most specifically with the community that came to Florida after Hurricane Maria. And so we commissioned them to create this work. It's a 4-chapter multi-screen video installation. It starts with images from outer space, runs through with NASA, based in Florida, of course, runs through basically the landscape and the environment in Central Florida, stops briefly in Disney World, where a lot of Puerto Ricans work, and ends up with a dance floor in a swamp, taking an idea from Pulse, the nightclub Pulse, and viewing Florida and the community as a big dance floor. So it's a very interesting, it packs quite an emotional punch. And it really looks at, they were interested in looking at how these communities are hybridizing. It's very thoughtful, very impressionistic. It's 32 minutes. It is well worth coming and watching it. And it'll take you on a journey. Shall we move on? All right. Jorge González Santos lives and works in San Juan, and his recent work serves as a platform for the recuperation of marginalized vernacular material culture, but also as a continuous attempt to produce new narratives between the indigenous and the modern. So this piece, he's referring to Taíno agricultural practices. The Taíno are the indigenous people who inhabited Puerto Rico at the time of Columbus. Their name for Puerto Rico is Boricua. So you'll often see people calling themselves Boricuans or coming from Boricua. And so what he's done, and there is, although like most indigenous populations in the New World, especially in the Caribbean, were decimated, there still does remain quite a presence of Taíno culture and DNA. So this is Jorge, part of a larger project that he does that is really looking at any manner of vernacular types of expressions and crafts, whether they be Taíno or whether they be 20th century. So in this case, on your left, you see a representation of a zimi, which they were little stone sculptures that are thought to be embody spirits for crops. And then on the right, you could see a pattern for weaving. So he's bringing in as well the products of the agriculture. He's created implements, farming implements. On the left is a escobilla or a broom. And then the one on the right is a koa or a digging stick. And so both of those were created from indigenous materials. Quite a beautiful project, I think.
It really is. It really is. And you know, the thing about Jorge also is that his entire project weaves craft and, you know, the critical notions of contemporary art sort of together. That's the larger project. Most of his specific objects work essentially to sort of fulfill that brief, right?
Yeah, he's very interested in you know, group learning and in recuperating and in saving all these, not only, but he works with mid-century architecture as well, indigenous crafts, all kinds of stuff. Really, really expansive project.
And you know, expansive project, and one that he's actually been very successful in getting out into the world. Jorge is sort of
Yes.
everywhere at this point. He's at the Whitney's, here, he's there. Anyway, again, another artist who we're lucky to actually have met, visited the studio, and brought him into the project. The image that we're looking at are two works by Gillo Tirado Rivera. The topmost piece, let's talk about that. It's obviously a neon sculpture. You may not be able to fully see what it says, but I want you to imagine a structure, a building, maybe a hotel-like building. This is sort of hung in terms of the gallery, right, at sort of a hieratic height. Think of the side of a hotel building with this neon on it. It says Caribe Hostil is what it reads, which means hostile Caribbean, but it's done in the lettering and in the color of a major luxury hotel in San Juan called the Caribbean Hilton, right? Caribe Hostil, Caribbean Hilton. The Caribbean Hilton Hotel opened in 1949, and today it's one of the premier luxury resorts in Puerto Rico, promoted, financed, and built by the Puerto Rico Industrial Development Company. Itself created in 1942, to create an inexpensive base for U.S. industry. Obviously, this sign is both mirroring and mocking sort of the original design for the sign itself. The sandcastle that you're seeing lower down is another hotel, rendered essentially sort of as a sandcastle. It's called Castillo Nl1 Normandy, that is sandcastle number 1 Normandy. And it's again after another sort of iconic building, iconic hotel. Think of Puerto Rico's tourism industry, that is sort of major industry, right? Think about buildings deteriorating over time. Think about old hotels and what happens to them, especially after major storms and what might happen to them after climate change. Essentially, that's sort of that's the larger metaphor for this sandcastle, which we've imported into the middle of the gallery. The idea is that the piece is going to deteriorate over time, just like buildings do, right? We may or may not decide to do some maintenance on it, just as, you know, people may or may not decide to do maintenance on the original building. And we'll see. But in any event, you get the idea that what Gillo is after illustrating here is sort of not just the shifting sands of time, but maybe the shifting sands of politics. And again, now, not just climate change, but climate disasters, right? That's you. Oh, and I should also say that he is the person who I referred to earlier, who works in this great DIY space with Karlo. They really have a terrific gallery. And they managed to make a real connection with a number of other sort of young artist-run spaces in Latin America. So they basically developed a circuit for themselves. There's another space in Santiago, Chile, and one in Buenos Aires, one in Bogota. I'm forgetting where the last one is, but in any event, they've managed to take the idea of DIY from the studio to the exhibition space and even the art fairs, and expanded their role. They're not just artists; they're sort of cultural agents, right?
And Christian, I think this also highlights the expertise of the cam installation crew. You know, Yiyo sent a wooden mold from Puerto Rico, and then Tony and Eric reproduced it. You know, they got, with all of these works, with almost all of these works, the crew was in constant contact with the artists as of how the work should be shown, any problems that might have come from shipping. So it was really a collaboration on a large scale.
That's absolutely true. Even down to sort of like, you know, what kind of sand we had available here versus Puerto Rico, right?
Exactly.
Right.
Okay.
So now we're looking at the work of Gamaliel Rodriguez. Gamaliel, look, one of the themes that basically sort of runs through the show, as I think you've seen already, is the notion of dystopia, right? And of storm, and what happens after the storm, and what things look like, and how the wear and tear basically manifests. And so what Gamaliel's done here is essentially sort of manifest the wear and tear of Puerto Rican society and culture in drawing in pen and pencil. These 4 drawings of airport towers, right? Airport control towers in Puerto Rico. Each one of these airport towers, these control towers, are actually real, right? They actually exist, and they were all disabled when Maria destroyed the already fragile power grid in Puerto Rico. As many of you know, Puerto Ricans were out of electricity for weeks, months. So again, I think in the essay for the show, Noel rightly points out that even before the storm, the airports, these towers constituted entrances and exits, right? What happens when those entrances and exits no longer function? What happens when people can't get in and out of the country? What Gamaliel sort of realizes here is again the dystopian nature of the current moment. Again, this is not just science fiction. This is real. This happened and is happening. And so, you know, you have these overgrown structures that have basically lost all their function. And now they look like, well, you know, monuments, right? Monuments to sort of a failed experiment in progress, or at least a failed experiment in maintaining the basic infrastructure of society.
Wow. So Gabrielle Ramos is an artist based in Tarpon Springs. And we're very proud because Gabrielle has a BFA from USF. May I also say, I don't think I mentioned that Jezebeth, whose work we saw, has an MFA from USF. So we were, first of all, we're very pleased that we were able to include artists who live and work in Florida. That really meant a lot to us. But also that they're USF graduates is really terrific, like the cherry on the you know, on the top. So Gabrielle is a sculptor, but he also works in photography. Sculptor and installation artist who works includes video and photography. In this case, he's worked with, you know, he works with basically the idea of perception and space, balance, all of those really technical kind of aesthetic ideas as he deals with line and shadow. But I think that in this case, he's very particularly referring to the urban landscape in Puerto Rico. If you've ever been to San Juan, or for example, Puerto Rican neighborhoods in Tampa, you will see that, that ironwork is very important to domestic and official architecture. So in San Juan and the colonial and area, you'll see just, in Old San Juan, you'll see very sort of flowery, curly Q type, New Orleans type, maybe wrought iron. And then when you go into the neighborhoods, it's much more prosaic, much more abstract. In this case, he's clearly playing with the idea of, I think, music. Some of them, líneas de plátano, lines on a plantain. So, and what I think is, and also I think he's referring to the great sort of Afro-Caribbean tradition of ironwork that you see all through the islands. What I think is so gorgeous about this piece is the interplay between the work, the ironwork and the shadows. I think it's just exquisite the way it doubles the meaning, it blurs the meaning. The shadows actually create a second part of the piece. And so again, I'd like to salute our crew and the lovely or really incredible lighting work that Gabrielle did in collaboration with Tony Palms. So just such a beautiful piece.
I think all the pieces in the show obviously benefit by being seen in person. But
Yes.
I think Gabrielle's possibly more than most.
Yeah.
This is Ivelisse Jimenez. She lives and works in San Juan and New York. In fact, when we did not manage to meet her in Puerto Rico when we were there doing the initial round of visits, but I did happen to meet her in New York. And that's when we sort of onboarded her, as it were, to participate in the show. As you can see, Ivelisse's paintings are not conventional paintings. They don't even hang on the wall. These are hanging near the windows of the museum. They have something of the nature of stained glass, of a vitrol, right? They are essentially paint, vinyl paint trapped within sheets of plastic that she then exposes to the elements, so that the elements themselves basically produce some decay. Again, back to the decay that we've seen referred to in a number of works by different artists in this show, right? What she aims to do, so she says, is for her paintings to invite reflection on the idea of culture in nature, right? Of that exchange and how that happens. Maybe now that I'm drawing the connection, in a way not dissimilar to Gamaliel's monuments, right? Monuments after their use. She started working on both of these paintings. Actually, let me say that one of the things that we experienced as curators in putting together the show with a year-long delay is, as Margaret initially mentioned, is that the show evolved, right? We had a list of works when we got back to being able to sort of like think about putting the show on again, that had to be changed, often because some of those works were no longer with the artist, meaning that they had gone out into the world, and good thing for that, right? But also because often the artist wanted to present another work that they thought hit our present seemingly constant storm global constant storm with a bit more of a bullseye. So these particular pieces, like I said, Ivelisse started working on right after Hurricane Maria. They are called Gelid Flow 3 and Gelid Flow 4. I don't remember if I already said that. But again, they are basically sort of stained glass windows, prisms that, you know, not only invite meditations on the limits of human understanding, particularly with respect to nature, but I'm going to quote her here. She wants these to be a way of exploring the complex, is her quote, the complex relations between consciousness and experience, and establishing them as a way to work through the complexities around me and to communicate a sense of fluidity and impermanence. And I think we have just now gone through all 14 artists who are in the show.
We have.
Yeah.
Christian, before we close, I want to thank you. It's just been wonderful collaborating with you on this show. You know, you just added so much, and it was just a blast. So I want to thank you.
Back at you with a kiss. Well, I think maybe we've come to the end of our narrative in terms of the show. I don't know if there's any questions out there.
Yeah, let's hear from Mark and see if anybody sent in some questions or if he has a brilliant one.
Well, we don't have any as yet, but I'll do my best to come up with something here. I've been thinking the show really focuses on a recent history of Puerto Rico. And I wonder, as curators, you've been speaking with all these artists, do you have a sense of what the future of Puerto Rico looks like right now? Or, you know, it's a huge question, obviously, right? But I wonder just if you've gotten any sense from in all your conversations of what that might look like.
Noel, you want to take that?
Well, I think I can say with some optimism that people in the mainland United States are learning these days much more about Puerto Rico. So I think it's much more in the news, and the news is more nuanced. And I also think that the many Puerto Ricans who have moved to our country, excuse me, this is what we do, right? It's like we're the same country. But I think that they are going to have some political heft, hopefully in the future. So lots and lots and lots of problems and lots of things to solve. But I do have I'm optimistic about the people and their resilience and about their capacity to overcome, to reform, etc. So I can't tell you anything about anything else, but that's my kind of feeling.
In the sense I have is that there is room for optimism. I think Noel is absolutely right in saying that possibly driven by, you know, this new diaspora of Puerto Ricans to the U.S. Suddenly, you know, you have the potential for larger voting constituencies that might change certain Congress people's minds or certain senators or certain governors' minds when they, you know, about local politics, regional politics, but also national politics and politics towards the island. That's how you acquire and apply political pressure. On the other hand, it does seem to me, and this is what I've gotten in my interactions with the artists in this show, that the problems are so intractable, they're so large, that an immediate fix is not in the, you know, not in the forecast. That, you know, the problem with the debt, you know, the problems with corruption, the problems with infrastructure, which continue to sort of pop up, right? We're unfortunately constantly reading about massive infrastructure problems all over Puerto Rico. So, you know, on the one hand, you know, there is, I think, you know, hope that there will be hopefully a greater representation, political representation for Puerto Ricans both on and off the island. But the problems are big. They're, you know.
They really are.
Great.
Okay, well, maybe I will kind of close the evening with making a few comments. I wanted to mention that if you have not seen the exhibition, I encourage you to go in and you can sort of reflect on much of the commentary tonight, because there are QR codes on each label. And the narrative about each work is in both Spanish and English. And I would like to thank David Waterman for his tremendous voice, his radio voice that sounds so great as you listen to the commentary, which is often coming from Noel's essay about each of the works in the exhibition. And then I want to thank Marty de la Cruz for her Spanish narrative.
Yes.
And then in addition to that, let's thank Will Litch for taking great photographs of the show, and Don Fuller for creating this virtual gallery so that even you can view the show, even if you haven't seen it or after you've seen it, again, in this virtual format. And I want to thank Mark, as always, who's right here with us tonight, for his logistics and for his intelligence and for all that he does to make our programming work well. I can't say enough about Eric Jonas and Tony Palms, and I think Noel and Christian have suggested that whole installation was a collaboration with the artists, and that's very much what we're about, is kind of elevating or serving as a platform for artists instead of elevating their work so it's seen in the best possible way. And I think I give tribute and thanks to the installation crew. Eric Jonas has just been amazing. We had to bring in St. Kate's Fine Arts. We didn't have to, we did. I guess we had to too. And they were great collaborators in helping us install the exhibition. And then please come in and see the show. There is now a brochure with a beautiful essay and pictures of the exhibition that's free for you to pick up. And that again will review some of the things that were said here tonight. And Noel, I thank you for your great essay. And then once again, I'm going to say, come on November 19th. First, go see the show right now. Spend some time with it. We'll try to get Miguel to come in maybe on the 19th or the 18th and give another talk in the gallery. We're just trying to work out that detail. I think Wanda and Gabrielle will come to the opening so you can have a chance to chat with them about their work and celebrate this great exhibition from 6 to 8 p.m. And if you're not on our email blast list, then get on it. You can always contact Mark and he'll put you on it. And you'll learn about all the wonderful things that the Contemporary Art Museum faculty and staff do. So thank you all for being here tonight. Thank you, Christian and Noel, for leading us through the exhibition with your wonderful remarks. I think I understand the show so much better and have so many other ways to access the ideas thanks to you. So thank you all for being here tonight. See you soon in the museum, I hope. Good night, everybody.
Thank you, Margaret.
Thank
Good
you.
night.